Hello boys, and welcome to your first science lesson via online learning. So during this lesson we're going to continue with the theme that we looked at last lesson related to classification. So last lesson I had you look at the classification of some different species. We looked at the alien task, and as you'd remember, for homework I asked you to complete the classification of each of those aliens using the tabular key provided. Now, everyone in the class was given a hard copy of this sheet, and remember we were using this tabular key here to describe each of the aliens. If you haven't yet completed that, can you please make sure that you go through that first? That is the first task that I want you to complete. The second task that I'd like you to work through is the second thing I'd asked you to complete for homework was the classification of Dr. Redback's family, which was shown in chapter 6.3. I've included a PDF copy of that chapter here, but you can also access it via the Oxford Online. Now, I've just got the relevant pages open. So, like I said, I'd asked you for homework to complete the classification of the rabbit, the bird, the dog, and the cat. In your exercise book, you could use this dichotomous key here to help you describe each of those. So please make sure that you have completed the classification of those animals. If you have completed the classification of those animals, I would then like you to complete the classification of each of the people in the image as well. You don't need to draw the picture. If you really wanted to and you were keen, you could print out that picture, cut it out and stick it into your book. Otherwise, you could just write rabbit, and then you could label the rabbit's name, bird, and you could write the bird's name, dog, etc. And then you could find some ways of describing the people, and I'd like you to classify each of those people. Now, just for a bit of a recap about the difference between the dichotomous key and the tabular key. So a dichotomous key is always split into two different branches, and we can use either yes or no questions to help classify a certain species or a certain object. So we know that some of the questions on the dichotomous key that you were using to classify Dr. Redback's family was, for example, does the animal have fur, yes or no? And depending on whether that was a yes or no, you would move in a certain direction. So if it had hair all over its body, then we can then see, does it have short ears or long ears? If it has short ears, we follow this branch. If it has long ears, we follow this branch, and so on until we can classify each of those family members. So another way that we looked at classifying things was through the use of a tabular key, which is what is shown here, and which is similar to what we use when we're classifying the animals, where the aliens, where we look at the two questions, and depending on the answer to each of those questions, we have to go to a specific question, and we continue our way through until we finally classify the animal or person. So I'd first like you to complete those two tasks. Once you've completed the classification of all of Dr. Redback's family, so not just the animals, the people as well, I would then like you to have a go at these check your learning questions. Now, you're not doing all of them. We are only doing the questions that I have listed here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and only 6A. Now, when we are writing responses to these, you will be able to use some of the text here to help assist in writing your answer. So in our very first question, what is a dichotomous key? We know that a dichotomous key is a visual tool, so this is a bit of an example of how you should be writing your answers. It's a visual tool which is used for the classification of organisms. Scientists can use this type of key to make simple yes or no decisions at each branch. Each answer leads to another branch and another question, and eventually to identify the organism. So you can use that to answer question 1. And then I'd like you to work through the remaining questions which were listed. Once you have completed that, and if you complete that today, I've then attached another worksheet here. So we have worksheet 1. Now, Since some of these questions double up with the check your learning questions, I'm not going to ask you to do those again. But what I am going to ask you to do is I'd like you to use this dichotomous key to help us describe the science class at Stickman Secondary College. So who are the students at Stickman Secondary College? Well, here you go. Here are each of the people. So if we look at our first example, we have a girl, and we'd start off by saying, who am I? Do I have a skirt or no skirt? Well, she has no skirt, therefore I go no skirt. Is she wearing pants or no pants? She's wearing pants, therefore I would come here. Is she wearing shoes or no shoes? She's not wearing shoes, so I'll go no shoes. Does she have hair or does she have no hair? She has hair. Does she have spikes or no spikes? She had no spikes, therefore she is meaner. So I'd like you to go through and classify each of the people A through to L. You will not need to do M through to R. Those people there were required for you to use the remaining information on that dichotomous key to draw them yourself. If you're keen and you finish early, then I encourage you to have a go at those ones. But for now, the classification of those people would be fine. So just to clarify what you need to do, first, make sure that you complete the classification of Dr. Redback's family. Once you've completed the classification of Dr. Redback's family, you will move to, in chapter 6.3, the check your learning questions, the ones that I have listed. Remember, we're not doing all of them. I went through question 1, so you'd be able to skip back in this video and quickly have a look at the way that we described the response there. Try and give as detailed responses as possible. Don't just give 2-word answers, and you can use the text to actually help you write your responses. And then once you finish those questions, then you'll move on to worksheet 1, where you are describing the students at Stickman Secondary College. So as per usual, I'll be available on Teams to support you through any of those questions that you might be struggling with. As per usual, please make sure that you're keeping your bookwork as neat as possible. We're ruling up pages, we're ruling our margins, we're labelling our titles on the pages, and clearly label what you're actually doing. So if you're classifying Dr. Redback's family, please label that's what you're doing. I feel like that's one thing that some people in the class last term did really, really well, but other people we might need to have a little bit more work on presenting our work a little clearer. So then in a week's time or a few weeks' time, when maybe we're revising for a test, we can actually see what we've done in our exercise book. When you are answering the questions from Check Your Learning 6.3, you don't necessarily have to write out the questions, but just make sure that you label clearly Check Your Learning 6.3 question 1, and then you can write your response. So yeah, any questions, please feel free to speak to me on Teams. Otherwise, I'll leave that there. Good luck with that, and I'll see you guys soon.